Eagle 6 in the train.
Roger.
Viper 1 bombs away. 1's going to climb high above 20. You're south.
Eagle 6 radar contact. Eagle 6 is visual.
And it goes left.
Well, welcome back to the DCS SITREP, which is the new show on the world's premier combat flight simulator for the home PC, DCS World. It's brought to you by Eagle Dynamics, and once again, I'm your host, Prickly Hedgehog, giving you the analysis of what we see from the ED DCS World franchise. Well, ED's recent newsletter was all about their latest map venture, which is Iraq, something we were promised for 2024, along with the more recent release of Afghanistan and subsequent updates to that particular map. Now, both are able to be purchased in one upfront lump price in the e-store, or you can tackle it in bite-sized versions for those on a budget or for those making more tactical decisions about what they want from these maps. Now, in the case of the Iraq map, the latest, the lump price is currently 30% off as part of the typical pre-order sales that we generally get with most modules, making it shy of $50, just shy of $50 US. So not a bad price for a really, really good-looking map based on what we can see so far. So let's look at the ED write-up and some of the highlights that we can expect from this particular map, which will include content that will naturally be added at a later date, including 2025, they say, for the southern portion of the map. Now, if you order the entire map right now, you're going to get the following: the entirety of Iraq, that includes all significant cities, air bases, points of interest, and more. Includes also the detailed northern region of the map, and this is something I'm stressing here, that northern region is going to be added first, and then later on you're going to get the detailed southern region map when that's available, probably in 2025 by the looks of things. Most likely 2025, that's what they're promising. And they're also saying here we're going to see a new level of terrain detail and accuracy, which is really interesting. So what's in the northern portion of Iraq? They say, well, key locations are going to include Baghdad, Kirkuk, Suleimania, and more. Key air bases include Al-Assad, Balad, Baghdad International, and more. So this is going to be a great place to recreate the war on terror and also the war on ISIS in Iraq, which, remember, flared up when the Obama administration elected to begin withdrawing US troops, and nature abhors a vacuum, and ISIS quickly filled in the gap, causing quite a lot of problems, at least briefly. Now, purchasing DCS Northern Iraq makes the entire map flyable in single player and multiplayer, but only this region will be in the highest detail. Now, Southern Iraq, they say, coming in 2025, featuring strategic locations such as Basra, Najaf, Amara, Nasiriyah, and the Shatt al-Arab waterways, covering the west coast, Persian Gulf, that also includes Kuwait, Bahrain, and much of Saudi Arabia. So really exciting regions there. Very interesting choices there to expand out some of the map. So this is going to be perfect for pilots interested in recreating Operation Desert Storm and Operation Iraqi Freedom missions, which occurred after the initial Desert Storm event. So purchasing DCS Southern Iraq will make the entire map flyable in single player and multiplayer, but again, this region will be in high detail. So again, just to reiterate, you can purchase just the northern portion of the map, or you can just purchase the southern portion of the map. Each one, once they're fully fleshed out, will give you high detail. If you want the entire map, though, you need to buy either both portions, or you need to buy the entire map to receive the high quality textures that will be available across the entire map. Otherwise, you're not going to get that. In this case, given the map details that I've seen thus far, I don't know why you wouldn't buy the whole map. Looks like a really fantastic looking place to fly. So here are some of the details. They're talking terrain refinement. They have meticulously enhanced and are continuing to add high resolution textures while simultaneously improving the normal maps and terrain elevation mesh, the goal of which is to provide an outstanding and immersion experience from very low to very high altitude. Airbase detailing. So final touches are being applied to all major airbases that include accurate layouts, taxiway and runway signs, lighting, surface textures, hardened aircraft bunkers, and support facilities. All air bases are being recreated with detail and authenticity in mind. Ground objects. They are developing detailed models of unique buildings, vehicles, points of interest like monuments and dams, and environmental assets. We've seen very distant, I guess, snippets of this with some of the videos that WAGS has been producing over the last few weeks, giving us a little bit of a teaser there. Mission and campaign development. Now, our mission creators are preparing a variety of missions for our most popular aircraft. Mission scenarios include the Gulf Wars, War on Terror, and operations against ISIS. No surprise there. Really exciting. Now, upcoming plans before launch include prioritization of the following items to ensure a smooth and enjoyable day one launch. Obviously, performance optimization is critical, something that I talked about last week in my video about what makes a really good map in DCS. So these include things like reducing load times, enhancing frame rates, and ensuring stability during large-scale battles, which is an interesting thing and something that came up a little bit with the Enigma channel's discussion recently. Enigma made a really interesting video, which we're going to come back to in a sec. Massive multiplayer testing. Again, extensive multiplayer sessions are scheduled to stress test the service and refine the online experience. I think this is going to be a very, very popular multiplayer map. The goal is to provide a seamless, lag-free environment for cooperative missions and competitive battles. No surprises there. Community feedback integration. We're actively engaging with testers and community members. Your feedback is invaluable, and we're committed to incorporating your suggestions for a polished final product. I don't have access to this map yet. I'm not sure if Eagle Dynamics is going to allow those of us as content creators access to these maps at this point. Prior to release, we weren't able to get our hands on Afghanistan either. Maybe a select individual or two, but I'm certainly not on that list, it seems. So sadly, I can't give you any more experiences other than what you've seen. So regardless of all of that, I'm excited about the map. I think, I noticed definitely some feedback on the teaser video that questioned why this map was being introduced when Afghanistan hasn't seen more pieces introduced. That's a fair question, I think. The team answered, though, in the newsletter that the Afghanistan map is still being developed in parallel and is also making rapid progress on both improving the available Southwest region and the upcoming East region that includes such noteworthy locations as Kabul, Bagram, and Jalalabad. And my guess here too is that perhaps the work that they have done on the VRAM coincided nicely with the Iraq map, and then some backwards work has to be done potentially on the Afghanistan map. So that could be one of the reasons why we haven't seen more work on the Afghanistan map. Hard to know. So we'll see what happens. Again, I'm hopeful for further updates to Afghanistan before year's end, and I suspect core engine developments are some of the driving factors here, but that is just a guess. That's my speculation. Now, as we know, recent updates that we talked about, the introduction of VRAM and ongoing improvements to the game's engine are critical for the success of DCS, which is going to have some competition for attention next month with the arrival of Microsoft Flight Simulator 2024. So I believe that these Middle East and Central Asian maps really do help stitch together some continuity between the maps we already have. We're talking Sinai, we're talking Persian Gulf, we're talking Syria, and therefore provide a useful platform for campaign makers to fabricate some really interesting missions and campaigns. Say, for example, you could use the same character to deploy in different theaters, across different platforms even, creating both a linkable mission set and a character storyline that could be really engaging. So just some food for thought there. I think it's a good thing. Again, these are important maps because of their recent history in the last 30 years, and also, continue to be the focus of Western interest, despite the very best efforts of some of these nations to have the West out of their business. So with that overarching, a simplified theme, we're still going to see conflicts, and we're still going to see great potential in these maps, in other words, for creating interesting scenarios. And I think there's more to flesh out in that region too, whether that comes in the version of other maps for the region or as part of the global map. I guess we'll have to wait and see as time progresses. So let me know your thoughts on the Iraq release in the comment section below.
Time unable.
Declare for Pablo, east 028, 17 miles, 35,000 feet, head west.
Eagle 1 set time for north container.
Now, in other news, ED released what I guess was a hotfix patch this week, which saw a number of fixes to campaigns, which I'll post a link to in the description below. These range from the Raven 1 campaign through to the Operation Mountain Breeze campaign, and some much-needed fixes for those in between. Some of the campaigns got more than others. I guess it just depended on what was, made a little bit of a a conflict with following that last patch we had a couple of weeks ago. Now, while we're on the topic of campaigns, you may have seen Reflected Simulations revealed he is working on yet another campaign for the Phantom 2. This guy is a workaholic, I must say. Now, hot on the heels of his massively enjoyable Mid-Killers campaign, which I'm still working my way through, Reflected's latest is called Red Flag 81-2. Now, as the name implies, and as you're probably guessing, if you're not unfamiliar with it already, this will be an historic campaign set in the 80s. He has actually a 10-minute announcement video you may want to check out if you're looking for more information about it, and also if you enjoyed the Mid-Killers and the Phantom 2. So this one's going to be set in the Nevada theater as well, so you'll need both the famous, with a PH, Phantom 2 module from Heat Blur Simulations and the Nevada map, which actually is a pretty good map. It's definitely showing signs of age. It's one I'd love to see ED redo, but obviously they've got their hands full right now. Now, actually, one thing I'd love to see would be an Alaskan map too, with some portions of maybe Eastern Russia to border this area. And we could do some Cold War intercepts as well for the F-14, the Phantom, maybe even earlier than that. That's obviously way down the list of map priorities for ED right now, but it just popped into my head there. Now, I hope we also hear some news about the Arctic Thunder campaign. It's being reviewed by ED right now. So remember, this is a co-op campaign by Bolted Dragon and Reflected Simulations, so you know it's going to be a knockout campaign. We'll have to keep our eyes peeled in a future update for more information on that, but right now, personally, I'm buried in enough campaigns and missions, let alone SITREP work, to keep me plenty busy. If you want to learn a little bit more about that campaign, the Arctic Thunder one that is, Reflected has another good video covering major aspect of the pair's work on that. It's about 26 minutes worth of information, so again, a good one to go check out.
3208, 25,000 hostile. Tracking east, Pablo.
Alright, next turn point is in.
Target group, raw, 05020, 25,000. Threaten to Cylon. That's Cylon. 3005.
Well, that almost brings us to the end of another SITREP. I'm keeping my eyes peeled on official third-party modules. A lot of you ask about other modules going on right now. There are a lot of unofficial modules as well, too many for me to keep track of. The Corsair, for example, from Magnitude 3, we haven't heard much on that. The LA7 from Octopus G, and of course the A7E2, as well as many, many others. The A7, of course, is by Flying Iron Simulations. Magnitude is also working on the Crusader as well, and they're also redoing the MiG-21. So there's plenty of modules out there being worked on. We're still waiting for work on the C-130, I think. So yeah, we have plenty of projects in the pipeline to keep us pretty entertained. Unfortunately, a lot of the module makers are pretty quiet on the news front at the moment, but I have no doubt that they are busy working away, and hopefully we'll see some more progress reports in future. Some of the teams only do, biannual or annual updates, so that leaves, a long time between drinks. So any snippets of information we get useful indeed. As I mentioned before, there was a really interesting video on the Enigma channel recently discussing whether or not DCS is too big to fail. At least that was the title. And I think based on what he was describing, it was inspired at least in part by news we discussed last week about a potential Razbam announcement. We haven't had that yet. And then it sort of evolved into can DCS survive without Razbam or with Razbam? So in other words, the franchise, despite all the issues, is still going relatively strong, despite all the criticism. And one of the criticisms he had was the way in which ED has stayed within its lane and focused on certain types of gameplay that a lot of players don't necessarily enjoy. And as a PvP player himself, he kind of argued that perhaps a lot of us are using the game incorrectly. So I think he makes some really interesting points about that, about the thrust of the game and how perhaps it doesn't shine in a pure PvP environment, since the game was never designed with that focus. It appears it excels in the single-player procedural systems niche, which a lot of people do enjoy. In fact, I enjoy that process myself, because that's a whole compartment, if you like, of flying and systems learning that a lot of people don't necessarily enjoy or only need to have the basics of to be able to get the best out of PvP type work. And DCS works well in that, but not perhaps as good as it could. Now, based on my own experience, I think where it really excels is in the sort of virtual squadron level for players looking to learn certain things, do certain things well. Whether or not there is some PvP in there, certainly it can work very well within that small niche of players and doing some very specific things, which is quite feasible in the DCS environment. Now, in thinking about all of this and this overarching theme in the latest Iraq teaser trailer, I noticed a lot of comments deriding ED for using Razbam modules knowing that they're not supported. Again, even that is sort of a tenuous argument, I guess, in some ways, because in some aspects they have been supported, very limited, obviously, but in other ways, yes. We're waiting for something to happen, right? And the longer the game goes on, the potential for more bugs to creep in or for fixes not to be corrected are going to creep in. Nineline made a really interesting retort to one user on this angle, stating that, and I quote, "We plan to support those," and this was reference to the Mirage. This was reference to, I don't know if the F-15 was in there. I can't remember off the top of my head. There were F-15Cs, I think, that we saw. And of course, we did also see the Harrier. So again, we plan to support those. They will remain working well into the future, no matter the outcome. Thanks, Nineline/Norm. Now, that's a really interesting comment. There's a number of ways that you could interpret that, and I certainly have some theories. One is, say, for example, Razbam sells the modules back to Eagle Dynamics. It says, okay, to resolve all this, to get rid of all the conflicts and the concern, here's a price for us to turn over the code and turn over those modules to you so that they can be supported. But we're done with you, and we're going to move on to other projects. Let's say that's a thing. Certainly the game would be poorer without them, but by the same token, let's say that doesn't happen, and as kind of Enigma hinted, DCS support, despite all the criticism, actually remains pretty strong. So it appears, regardless of the PR challenges of managing a public disagreement like this, which has obviously caused both teams considerable harm, I agree with Enigma that in part some of the damage was offset by the release of really, really popular modules like the Phantom II, which actually sold extremely well, unsurprisingly, because I think the aircraft themselves, when they're recreated in the virtual environment and become this virtual museum, are highly popular. They bring their own kudos, they bring their own mana, if you like, as we say back in New Zealand, that people are endeared to them and are going to buy them regardless of other things going on. They want to fly them. People want to experience these aircraft because they are fan favorites, they're historical favorites, they're personal favorites of the individuals looking to buy and fly them. And also, perhaps to a lesser extent, the Kiowa 2, which I think is a very popular helicopter. And so there's a list of promised aircraft out there too, especially in the Cold War era, like, for example, the A6, promises by Heat Blur for the F-14D, which they hope to be able to do if the data is available. The very, very potent late Gen 4 beast like the Eurofighter, and also aircraft like the Tornado as well. So there's enough distraction out there, if you like, to soften some of the damage from the conflict with Razbam. And even though I think if we were to lose those top three aircraft like the Mirage, the F-15E, and the Harrier, it would put a massive dent in the DCS ecosystem. I don't think long-term it would be catastrophic for DCS. It would certainly affect a lot of people. There'd be a lot of gnashing of teeth, a lot of pissed off people. But I think the longer it goes on, and if DCS survives that, which I think it would, then distance from that is survivable, if you like. The pain, would eventually subside enough that people would come back to the franchise that may have been pissed off in the past just to see what's going on. And with the new players coming in, and I think there will be new players too following the release of Microsoft 2024, because there's going to be a new generation of people coming through who want to experience that. I think there's a lot of legs left, despite all this conflict, for DCS World. It's still going to be the premier combat flight simulator, like I said, because as far as I know, Microsoft Flight Simulator is not going to offer that combat. And one of the reasons that they went to a new game engine, if you like, or new code, was to be able to do some things that they couldn't do with regards to the way that they had written the code for 2020. They wanted to be able to do more missions that players wanted for helicopters and things like that. People were bored of just flying around aimlessly. They wanted a little bit more interactivity. That's something that you get from DCS World. because you can do cargo hauling, you can do logistical sort of stuff. You can just fly around, and you can also, if you want, use the aircraft in Angra. And again, that's not something that Microsoft Flight Simulator 2020 at least could offer. Opening doors, some stuff that they couldn't model properly. DCS does a lot of that. It has very, very complex flight models, pretty complex weapon system modeling. Even though it's all for entertainment and it's simulated, it still does the job of providing the illusion that you're really in combat with somebody else. That gets the heart rate going. And to a greater or lesser degree, the weapons mimic what we would expect to see or an experience in the real world. So yeah, it's a really interesting time, and we'll see how things pan out.
Uzi 4, splash both bandits. Target, 3 miles. Get ready. Splash! Bandit is down.
So that's it. That's this week's SITREP. Thank you once again for sticking around. Thanks for all the likes, the comments, subscriptions from last week as we trundle towards 12,000 of you as supporters, which is fantastic. This keeps the channel alive, which is challenging given my work commitments right now, and also some major home projects that I'm in the midst of. This might impact my schedule. I must give you a little warning. Mrs. Prickly Hedgehog has issued urgent orders for reinforcements on that front, irrespective of my current assignments, apparently. So you may see me temporarily every second week producing a video. We'll see how the assault progresses on the lounge room, dining room projects and how those things come to bear. We'll see. Yeah, just got to be done. She's laid the law down, so got to get it done today. I took a day off and did some of those projects, got some stuff going, but we've still got a lot of work to do. So cheers again. Thank you for being patient with me. Let me know what you think in the comments section below on any of the topics that we've discussed today and the future of DCS. We'll see you next time on the DCS SITREP.
Okay, steer point 2 is set. You can fly directly to it. It will be our northern point of Cap South. Setting up steer point 3 now.